From a highly secure network of top secret locations across South Texas, this is another off-season edition of the Spurs Insider. I'm Mike Finger, joined as always by our panel of Express News Spurs beat writers, Tom Orsborn and Jeff McDonald, along with sports editor Nick Talbot. We're going to answer all kinds of questions this week. What are the Spurs going to do during the NBA draft when they have 2 first-round picks? Might the local Cagers add a superstar in a trade before then? And the biggest question of all, is Victor Wembanyama trying to emulate our own Jeff McDonald? It's what everybody's talking about this week. Jeff, where do you want to start? Are you honored that the biggest star in San Antonio has chosen to adopt your hairstyle?
Yes, I am. I could give him some tips. I could give him some tips, Victor, some tips, sunscreen, hats, that sort of thing.
Yeah. He's out there living his life. That's been one of the big stories of the week. Victor Wembanyama hanging out with the monks.
I mean, every time you get on social media, Victor is somewhere else in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's had a hell of a summer.
He has.
He's
sort of. I think. I mean, it's not everything is about basketball, but I think Spurs fans should be kind of happy to see him out there having not necessarily having fun, but doing things. Like he's not sitting at home moping. He had a rough end of the season, and he's out there living his life, and I think that's cool.
Every day, it's like, where in the world is Victor Wembanyama?
Uh-huh.
And it could be literally anywhere. Like, is there anything that would surprise you if you popped onto Instagram today and there's a photo of Victor doing XYZ? Is there anything that would surprise you?
Well, all kinds of scandalous stuff would surprise me, but there's nothing wholesome that he could be doing that would surprise me.
Like he's on a SpaceX rocket to Mars.
That would surprise me.
And it's probably in his contract that he can't get on a SpaceX rocket.
Yeah,
insurance company would
yeah
scans at that.
Tom, are you happy to see Victor out there?
Yeah,
traveling the world.
Yeah, I am. He's a young man on a spiritual quest. Apparently, nothing wrong with that at any age, I guess. Trying to figure things out in his life.
I think instead of doing
support him 100%.
Yeah, instead of doing podcasts, more of us should be on spiritual quests. I think we'd be a little better off.
Well, here's a good question. Once Victor gets back from his spiritual quest, what's the team going to look like that he rejoins?
That is an excellent segue, Jeff McDonald. And since you made that segue, I think you should lead off the conversation about the San Antonio Spurs, who are heading into the NBA draft in 2 weeks. This will be our last chance to talk to the viewers. I know they're not viewers, listeners, about what the Spurs are going to do in advance of that draft. You will be in Brooklyn, New York, covering that draft in person. What do you expect the Spurs to do on the evening of June 25th? And do you expect any big moves before that evening?
Boy, that's a lot of questions all in one. But to answer the first one of them, I think we're all pretty convinced or pretty solid that they're going to use that number 2 pick and select Dylan Harper from Rutgers. That's kind of
we're pretty solid. Do you have a mouse in your pocket?
I think everyone you talk to is pretty. That seems to be the consensus. And we can get into trade scenarios later. I'm not sure the Spurs are super interested in trade scenarios that are going to cost them that number 2 pick. So I think it's a pretty good assumption they'll have the number 2 pick. They'll spend it on Ron Harper's kid. The big question is going to be what becomes of that 14th pick. Was it 14th? I can't remember.
Yeah,
at this point, we haven't talked about that one a lot, but that's the one that you could see being included in all sorts of trade scenarios. If they do end up making it, there's a lot of different ways they could go with that 14th pick in terms of adding either size or shooting, or optimally both if you could find that in one dude. So I think the first question you asked, I think it's I think we're going to see Dylan Harper in a Spurs uniform in training camp. After the draft on June the 23rd or whatever it is.
Tom, do you share Jeff's sense of certainty about this?
Um, I'm
Sounds like
maybe
no.
not.
Sounds like no.
I'm leaning toward it, yes, but not. I'm not certain. No. Yeah. I mean,
Because you think they would pick someone else, or because you think that pick is still in play in a trade?
I think right now I think they're approaching things just like I am. They're leaning toward it, but they just want to make damn sure right now there's another scenario that might shock people, but might be smart. Maybe something that doesn't involve a superstar player, but
Right.
yeah. So I think they're still in the due diligence stage, although they're leaning toward it. Yeah.
I would agree with that. And if they are leaning toward it, and if it does work out, I don't necessarily share Jeff's fait accompli about this. Isn't that like a Latin term for something's probably going to happen? Um, I'm not sure that it's 90%, but it's the most likely outcome. The Spurs are going to
Yeah.
take Dylan
Yeah.
Harper, and it would be great for this podcast if somebody on this podcast had talked to someone who knows Dylan Harper really well and could shed some insight. Any volunteers on that?
Tom, you want to take this one?
I know someone who has talked to people that know Dylan Harper very well.
Who's that?
My colleague, my esteemed colleague, Jeff McDonald.
Oh, that's me.
Oh,
That's
Jeff. Who'd you talk to
No,
this
I
morning?
actually got off the phone this morning with Steve Peichel. He's the coach at Rutgers. I thought I'd call him up and get kind of the little rundown on Dylan Harper, and also Ace Bailey, who is I guess is maybe a candidate for that number 2 pick, but is definitely considered a top 5 pick, and just kind of get the rundown on those guys, what kind of players they were, and there'll be a story on that coming out in the Express News and on expressnews.com in the near future. But for now, I guess the one of the takeaways that I got from it was, there's the people that are going to say that the small number of people who kind of question whether the Spurs should select Dylan Harper number 2. The reason obviously isn't talent. It's fit. The Spurs already have a De'Aaron Fox. They already have reigning rookie of the year Stephon Castle in the backcourt, and isn't Dylan Harper sort of redundant? Are you using your number one, your top draft choice this year and not really filling a need that you have, which is 3-point shooting and size, behind Victor Wembanyama? So that would be the reasons to not take Dylan Harper. And so I kind of floated that by Coach Peichel, that this notion is out there, and how would he fit on a team with De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle, and Steve Peichel says that, if to pass Dylan Harper up for that reason would be foolish. It would be foolish. He says Dylan Harper can play. He can play 3 positions and can probably guard 4 in certain situations, and works well on the ball and off the ball. He played a lot on the ball at Rutgers, obviously, because he was that dude. But Peichel has no question that Dylan Harper can play anywhere you want him. And I'll throw the caveat in there that there's never been an interview with any coaches, the coach of any college prospect who would answer that question otherwise. So you can take it with a grain of salt if you want. But he had a lot of good things to say about Harper and what kind of player he is. A lot of things you've seen if you've watched the highlights reels and the clips, just the finishing at the rim, the just elite scoring at the rim. The Spurs don't have a lot of those guys yet that can do that from the wing position. So, and a guy that, despite this is probably the wrong way to phrase it, but despite his NBA pedigree, where you'd think he might Dylan might expect things to be given to him, wasn't that kind of guy. He's a guy that worked hard and worked through things at every level. It was an interesting thing that Steve Peichel mentioned to me, that it seems funny to hear, but that it would be something that you would praise a guy for. But he was like, he played at one high school, he played at one AAU team. He was in college for 1 year, played for one team. He's not a guy that bounced around looking for greener pastures, which is kind of what a lot of these prospects are nowadays. They play at multiple high schools, multiple prep schools, bounce between AAU teams looking for better situations. Harper's more of a guy that wanted to pick a spot and make it work. And the other thing that the point that was made about both Harper and Ace Bailey is they're both super young. And yeah, most prospects these days are super young, but Ace was 17 when he showed up on campus. His mom had to sign his paperwork to make him a college basketball player. And Harper just turned 19 like last week or something. So they were very young in an era when college basketball is probably as old as it's ever been because of the fallout from COVID. You've got a lot of these guys that are like 6 years, 7 years, 25-year-olds in the league. So they were, you always kind of wonder how is this 18-year-old, this 19-year-old going to make the leap to the NBA and play against men? Well, they've had a little bit of a taste of that already and come through and shown. So I think all of that put together, whoever lands those two fine young gentlemen will probably be happy.
What do you say anything about his 3-point shooting? I remember.
Yeah. Like everyone, I think that'll come around with time and coaching. But yeah, he's a guy that has been, I don't want to say it's been so easy for him to get to the rim and score, but kind of like throughout his life. So the 3-point, the 3-point ball was not the primary focus of his arsenal, but it's something that can come along. Just like they said with Steph Castle, which we've talked about that on this podcast a lot. We think that will improve over time as well with Steph, and I think the same could be said of Dylan Harper.
He shot 33%, but I'm looking at his game by game. There was one stretch he was 3 of 6, 4 of 7, then 1 of 5, and then 4 of 7. So that's. And then there's other stretches, 4 of 8, 4 of 8, back-to-back games of 4 of 8. So I think there's.
I guess the other attribute I'd bring up that Steve Peichel brought up, and it's something now that I mentioned Steph Castle, it kind of reminded me of this because it's something we said about Steph all year. But like Dylan's the kind of guy that he's got this calm demeanor to him, unflappable demeanor. He's a guy that you just kind of trust with the ball in his hands and in big moments isn't going to be overwhelmed by any of that. And we liked that a lot about Steph Castle. I think that was a big reason Steph was able to make that transition to the NBA so smoothly, in that he wasn't really frightened or overwhelmed or perplexed by much, and had that sort of way of moving on to the next play, good or bad. And I think Harper has a lot of that in him, according to the guy that coached him in college.
Now, the significant difference there, of course, and this is not to downplay everything that you just said. Stephon Castle had shown all of that on a run to a national championship at UConn. Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey were on a team that finished with a losing record and didn't make the NCAA tournament at all. So Stephon Castle, a little more of a background in those big moments that you're talking about. I'm not sure. And Dylan Harper had a big moment in college.
That has actually been a big, kind of the question a lot of people ask. Well, if Rutgers had these 2 top 5 guys, how did they not even make the NCAA tournament? And
it's not a dumb question. It's not a terrible question.
No, of course. I mean, it's an obvious question. And part of the answer is, I mean, that team underachieved. Right. Yeah. I mean, like, you're right. They should have made it. But also Dylan Harper missed a month of that season with a high ankle sprain, in which time Ace Bailey did a pretty good job of taking over, had like 39 at Indiana, 37 against Northwestern. But they weren't whole for the entirety of that year. And the other thing is they started 4 freshmen. And yeah, 2 of them were otherworldly. But
Mhm.
in an era of college basketball where continuity matters and you have some of the best teams, the oldest teams, I think starting four freshmen, no matter how good they are, is a pretty tough hill to climb. Like it reminds me of the Kevin Durant team I covered
I was
at
about
UT.
to make that
Like
transition, Jeff.
like you're well we can talk about that guy later.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that team. Well, you have Kevin Durant. How do you only win? They made the tournament, but how do you only win one NCAA tournament game with Kevin freaking Durant? And it's because he was barely 18 years old and he's surrounded by people as young as he was, and you run into it to teams that are just more of a team than you are. It's hard. It's even in college, it's hard to go all the way with just a bunch of freshmen. And yeah, probably Rutgers should have at least qualified for the tournament now that like 87 teams make it. But you know, they didn't, and I don't think it's really reflective of the quality of player that either Dylan Harper or Ace Bailey is. I think it's just more reflective of their youth.
It's kind of a contradiction there, in that when an all world 18-year-old goes to college, he might be less prepared to succeed in the college basketball world of 2025, like Jeff mentioned, where you do have sixth year eligible players, seventh year, like 23 and 24 year olds. That might be a tougher transition for a guy like Dylan Harper than coming into the NBA, where he's got more of that experience around him. I think that's an accurate point. And you go
And I
back,
think,
Jeff McDonald. Go
well,
ahead.
just one more point. I'll keep stepping on your transition that you're trying to get to, but that point you're making when Dylan Harper comes to let's say the Spurs, he's not going to be the number one option. Even though the
Right,
Spurs were a team poor enough to garner the number two pick, they
right.
have guys that are going to be the ball's going to be in their hands a lot. He's going to be asked to do less for the Spurs than he at 19 than he was at Rutgers for 18. And I think that might make the transition could make the transition a little bit easier. You can focus on what you need to focus on instead of focusing on being the everything to everybody kind of thing.
Did anybody read the newspaper this weekend? The outrageous stuff that was in the sports section? Oh, it's on Sunday.
No, I was
That,
reading the outrageous stuff in the news section.
yeah, that's why I was specific about the sports section. Tom, did you see that story in that idiot columnist at the San Antonio Express News? What he wrote on Sunday?
Always read the idiot column. Yeah.
What did you think about that outrageous proposal of the San Antonio Spurs,
Uh-huh.
who that idiot columnist already like a couple of weeks earlier said local cagers should not be trading for Giannis. Like that would be that doesn't fit their timeline. Uh, they need to be thinking for the future. They need to be thinking long term. They need to build with their young guys. And then he turns around and says they should trade for Kevin Durant, or that could
Yeah.
be a good idea.
Yeah.
What the heck?
I it it caused a buzz in the city. I know that.
Did it?
A couple of people said, that idiot columnist? I think he finally found one he nailed.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Here's
They were
the,
positive. The reviews I got were positive.
then now there are some people out there, and I will admit to being the idiot columnist, and I will
Oh,
admit
that's what we were
to,
talking about.
I will admit to being sending kind of mixed signals on the Spurs offseason. And I still think that the
Well,
price for Giannis would be, it doesn't make sense for a team in this situation. I'm not ruling that out completely either, which is why I'm not as sure of Jeff on the Dylan Harper selection, because I still think there's a possibility out there that the Spurs find just a huge trade, and that number two pick is in play. I don't think that's a very high possibility. I think it might be slightly higher than what Jeff thinks. But the appeal of Kevin Durant, if I could lay out the argument here, is that all indications from people who cover the league, from people in the league, what everyone seems to believe these days is that the Suns pretty much have to trade Kevin Durant now. I think that's been the common consensus. If you ask anyone around the NBA, this deal is going to happen. The Suns are a complete mess. They can't go into another season with Kevin Durant and his walk here. they have to get rid of him. They have to trade. They have to get something for him. And unlike the case in a lot of these situations where a superstar is on the trade block, it doesn't appear to be an environment where the Suns are going to price Kevin Durant as a guy who the acquiring team can extend. Like they're selling 1 year of Kevin Durant basically. There's not going to be this situation where he has to arrange an extension with the team that acquires him. And when you put all that together, the price might not be nearly as high as one might think a future Hall of Famer, one of the greatest players of his generation, at age 37. I think he's going to be 37 when next season starts. It might not be as high as you think. And if you could put together a package, and this might be low, I'm not saying that this will happen or that Phoenix would accept this, but just for the sake of argument, if to make the salaries work, it's Devin Vassell and Harrison Barnes, both good guys, both guys the Spurs like a lot, both guys that the Spurs would miss if they were gone. But those two salaries make the trade legal, and then you throw in the 14th pick, this number 14 pick in the first round of this coming NBA draft. Maybe some seconds, some a far off first, whatever. Like, is that something that you're interested in? That is something that I am interested in. You can call me crazy, but I think that that makes sense to me. I will open it up to the floor.
Do you remember in this space, in this podcast space, a few weeks ago, maybe it's been months now, whenever the Giannis stuff first kind of started to become buzzy about around the Spurs, we kind of started talking about that trade, and I kind of just threw in passing, and we were kind of down on the trade, that a Giannis trade at that time as well. But I kind of just threw it out there in passing. And then the other thing you kind of hear is like this Durant stuff. And I remember saying I would not do that in a million years.
Uh-huh.
And I have to tell you that after reading your idiot column, you might have swayed me a little bit. You make some.
Here's the rest of it.
But the main thing was because of the price. I was at the time when we were first talking about the Durant trade, I was thinking of it as a superstar kind of blockbuster trade, and no, I don't want to give up Durant for the price. I was thinking at the time,
Harper.
I don't want to get the price. I don't want to get Durant for the price at the time that I thought the Suns were going to command. But if it's a deal like you just laid out, then yes, of course you have to look at that.
And it might not be that cheap. Like the teams that are mentioned as Durant possible destinations. Like if the Knicks are involved, the Knicks like to make a splash. They're reportedly interested. I think ESPN has that out there that the Knicks might be involved. Like they're going to the way the Knicks are operated, they're going to overpay.
You do not get into a bidding war for Kevin Durant.
No, you don't get into a bidding war.
You not get into a bidding
Houston.
war. That's where I'll draw
the Rockets are mentioned. The Houston Rockets are mentioned over and over as a possibility because Houston commands so many of Phoenix's future drafts, and it would be a convenient little swap back where Houston can send Phoenix their draft picks back, take Kevin Durant. Houston's closer to title contention than the Spurs are, and if you make more sense from Kevin's standpoint. I believe our friend of the podcast, Mark Stein, had out there over the weekend that the Toronto Raptors might be interested in Kevin Durant. Toronto Raptors are a franchise that kind of have a history of going after guys who are in superstars, who are in bad situations, knowing that Toronto generally isn't a free agent destination. If you're the Spurs, you don't get into a bidding war with any of those teams. The Spurs could win those bidding wars because they have so many picks, but I'm not out advocating like topping the Knicks' offer or topping the Raptors' offer. It's just a situation where if none of those teams pounce, and if Phoenix needs to take an offer here, and the Spurs have like Devin Vassell, that's an asset. It's not probably what the Suns dream of getting for Kevin Durant, but he's locked up for 4 years and $100 million, and he can score, and you could see him kind of teaming with Devin Booker in a fun backcourt and transitioning into that next era for the Suns, and then doing something with that 14th pick, maybe another pick down the line, not one of the big, like not Atlanta's pick, number one unprotected first, but a pick down the line when the Spurs expect to be contending, a first in that era, like all that would make sense. And to move to the next part of this conversation, where there might be really smart listeners out there wondering, well, how does Kevin Durant fit into the Spurs timeline? That's a very good question, listener. And part of my rationale for endorsing this is he, I would see Kevin Durant as kind of a bridge to the contention window. And this, I've mentioned this before on this podcast in the newspaper a bunch. The Spurs, no matter what they do, are not going to win an NBA title next year. It's very unlikely that the Spurs are going to win the NBA title in 2 years. That just does not happen in the history of the NBA. Teams this young with a star player like Victor Wembanyama, it takes so many years. No one has won a title that quickly since Tim Duncan did it a long, long time ago when he was surrounded by David Robinson and Sean Elliott and a veteran team. So I think if you have Kevin Durant for 1 year, for 2 years, whatever it might be, like that, he sort of does an on steroids version of what Chris Paul did last year. Like he takes you to that next step. He gets you into a playoff series. He maybe helps you win a playoff series. None of these guys on the Spurs roster has ever been in a playoff series. I guess De'Aaron Fox has been in one.
Harrison Barnes has won a title, but
well, Harrison Barnes would be leaving.
He would
in
be
that
there.
situation.
With, yeah.
Harrison Barnes would be leaving. But like this team needs to learn how to get into those situations, how to win in those situations, and yes, how to fail in those situations. And I think that even if Kevin Durant is here for 1 year and they have to move on, or they decide to let him chase a bigger contract somewhere else, that would be a significant step. It would be really fun to cover too. But also the price for it, and this is not a bash Devin Vassell podcast. This is a podcast that has an appreciation for all that he's all the ways he's improved, all his potential, all that stuff. But he's going to make over $100 million over the next 4 years. I don't think that's necessarily a terrible contract, but the local Cagers are going to award a very lucrative extension to De'Aaron Fox this summer. They are going to award a very lucrative extension to Victor Wembanyama in the coming years. They're going to award a very lucrative extension to Stephon Castle in the coming years, and presumably one for Dylan Harper. Like they're gonna have too many big contracts.
Maybe
Sohan
Sohan.
and maybe Sohan. I don't think this is going to be quite as lucrative. We can get into that debate later on in a future podcast, whenever you want to do it. But the point is, like, maybe shedding the Devin Vassell contract is a perk of this deal. And that sounds horrible. I'm not bashing Devin Vassell, but you're going to have to shed one of these deals at some point down the line. And if you want to get into like the fantasy basketball of what this does for the lineup, if you do draft Dylan Harper, if you're able to acquire Kevin Durant while hanging on to Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle and De'Aaron Fox, it gives you this really fun, like, inverted lineup where, and I'm not sure this would be the starting lineup, but it's a possible lineup where you have three playmaking, like, drivers, drive and dish type guys in Fox and Castle and Harper, with two bigs who can go out and shoot. Like, that's like, you get your shooting from the unexpected places. And I think that would be fun to watch. I think you still need bigs, traditional bigs. You still need guards who can shoot, like Julian Champagny type guys, to balance the lineup out. But I think that would be fun. And I don't think it's going to happen. Like I said, there are other places that make way more sense, but that is something I'd be open to at the right price.
The hated Houston Rockets, a little bit further along than our local Cagers.
Yes.
In the sense of going maybe deep into the playoffs.
Yes. And that's another reason why I think if you're ranking the Durant destinations in terms of likelihood that he'll end up there, I think the Rockets are ahead of the Spurs for like, first of all, they might want him more. because he fits their timeline a little better. And second of all, I think Durant might see a more attainable like trip to the finals with them than with the Spurs, who are going to need a couple years. But
does it
that was just a
matter?
fun off-season thing of like, I don't think this is as outrageous as some people might think it is, and there could be upsides to it. I
Does
don't
it
think
ma-
it's going to happen, but it'd be fun.
Does it matter where Kevin wants to go? Does he have any leverage here? A lot of times stars do have that leverage, but it's because teams are going to want to re-sign them past their current deal, and you don't want
that's
to trade for a
exactly
guy.
right.
But if you don't care about signing Kevin, after this deal ends, then I don't know that he has as much leverage.
Here's where I think it would matter. If he would tell Phoenix and the acquiring team, let's just say Houston as an example. Like, I have no intel on this. I'm not saying
This is a
this is
hypothetical.
out there, but just as an example, if Durant would tell Phoenix and have his representatives tell Houston, "Hey, I'm open to signing an extension with the Rockets for X number of years and X amount of money," that means that the Suns could get more of a package for Durant. Like, they'd get more stuff. And in that way, yes, Durant could pick a destination. But if there's no team out there that's willing to do that, if there's no team out there that wants to play ball and agree to that extension before he's traded, then the Suns just kind of get what they can get.
Yeah, I
If
don't know
that
if
makes
there's
sense.
a team that really wants to pay Durant into his 40s.
I agree, and that's why we're at this situation.
Like
That's why we're at this spot.
part of the perk of trading for Durant is you don't have to worry about after this contract. You're really, like you mentioned, you're just really renting him for a short time. That's
Yeah.
the idea of it. So I don't know if him, his
But a
camp
team
saying, we want to go to the Spurs. I don't know if that necessarily makes that happen. The Suns are going to take the best deal they can get.
Right. But a lot can change quickly in the NBA, as you know, and there could be a situation where Kevin is looking at the next chapter of his career, which would maybe going to the last team that he's going to play for, and decide, yeah, I want to sign an extension, go to a place where I know I'm going to be able to stay for 3-4 years into my 40s, and maybe a team like New York or Toronto offers him that. Maybe a mystery team does. Maybe Houston does. Again, I'm going to repeat it. I do not think this KD to Spurs is going to happen. I just think that it's attractive in some ways.
Man, you just
Go ahead,
broke
Tom.
Spurs Nation's heart because those guys think, if you get out there on the social media, they think the Kevin Durant thing is basically in the bag already.
Oh yeah,
The fans out there.
Wemby has great admiration for him, and he's got, Durant's got a strong personal relationship, I'm sure, with El Jefe.
Yeah, true.
oh yeah, yeah. Oh, I mean,
And he gets
that's
to
the other
play in
thing.
Austin.
Yes, I think that if Kevin Durant had his druthers, druthers is a word that's really entrenching me with the Generation Z crowd that we're after. Um, like he would be pro San Antonio in a lot of ways for what you mentioned. Like he comes back to Austin all the time. Just spoke glowingly about this region of the world when he was in Austin a few months ago. Has always had really nice things to say about Victor. Really connected with Greg El Jefe Popovich on their Olympic trip to Japan that I was fortunate to be able to cover. Like, those two guys got her along swimmingly, and Pop would still be around presumably. I think Kevin would see the upside of coming here. I just again don't want to act like it's a done deal or even a likely deal at this point.
From the Spurs perspective, the way to look at it is you don't need Kevin Durant right now.
Right.
You don't get it, like we were saying, you don't get into a bidding war because, my God, we got to get Kevin Durant. But if you can get him at for a relative bargain, then of course.
Yeah.
Then of course.
And that's not like a hot podcast take to
I guess if you're talking about the on the court stuff, my only devil's advocate thing would be, like, to this group, do you really want to add a player whose main contribution is like needs the ball in their hands.
Yes.
Needs to shoot a lot. Like you have
Yes.
Victor Wembanyama. You traded for De'Aaron Fox. Is it going to sort of mess up any sort of chemistry to have another guy that's going to need to take a bunch of shots? And that would be my only
Exactly what the Spurs need is a guy who needs to take a lot of shots, who can make a lot of those shots.
Well, can make and need
Is willing to.
Not willing to. It has to.
It's this. We're not talking about a ball hog here. Who's like the Spurs had shots to spare last year. It's not like they were. It was like who's going to be able to take all these shots? Like they had shots to spare. Bad players were taking too many shots for the Spurs last year.
Correct.
So on other teams, you might worry about, well, where are all the shots going to go? Like how are we going to have enough shots for Kevin Durant on the San Antonio Spurs 2025? You don't have to worry about shots being available to Kevin Durant.
I mean, if you can envision Kevin Durant being like, a version of what Steve Kerr was for the Spurs, just the guy that stands out there and makes threes.
You're being kind of ridiculous.
Well,
like Kevin Durant could lead the Spurs in shots if he comes here, and I think if he does come here, he probably would. In shots per game, and there'd still be plenty left over for Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox and Stephon.
But does it hamper those guys' development? The guys that are going to be here beyond Kevin Durant. I'm just devil advocating right now. I'm not saying I
understand that. How many years of development have we covered of young guys being able to develop on their own over and over again?
This team needs to start
winning.
Victor a year and a half.
This team needs to start winning freaking games. There's always going to be shots available for Victor Wembanyama. Kevin Durant is going to take no shots, no quality shots from Victor Wembanyama. If anything, Kevin Durant would improve the kinds of shots that Victor Wembanyama takes.
Yeah, he'll open things up. Yeah.
I don't think the only thing holding the Spurs back from doing this deal at that price is the fact that they might not get him at that price. If they could get him at the price that we just mentioned, there is no downside to it. You could even throw in, I was talking to Jeff off the podcast over the weekend, and yes, I occasionally am forced to do that. I know that the YouTube viewers out there are convinced that we all hate each other, but I did have to talk with him over the weekend, and he mentioned, Kevin Durant might be hurt for a lot of it. Like he's injury prone. He might have to miss a lot of games. That could be an upside too. Give him a few games off, let the young guys play together for a while, then come back for playoffs. Like there's not a lot of downsides to this for me. Maybe I'm crazy.
Well, I think we're all in agreement. If you can get him for the bargain that you laid out earlier, I think it's a good idea.
One quick question.
But anything,
go ahead.
But anything much more than that, I'm probably out. If it's much more than what you mentioned earlier, then I'm probably out.
So Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, number 14, and like a first round pick in 29 or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
I could do that. I would. This sounds kind of funny, but I would look for ways to, if you could not have Harrison Barnes in there, but that means giving up somebody with a lot more long term.
Nick's been trying to talk. I'm going to let him speak up, but then I'm going to get back to what you just said. Go ahead, Nick.
My general question is just what y'all are talking about is what's the max you would be willing to give up? You mentioned the Atlanta pick earlier. Some of the things out there have said that would be in the deal, or the proposed in the deal with just the prognostic. There's the people looking at.
That's not a deal breaker to me. I would try to do it without giving that Atlanta pickup. Like I said, the 14 this year plus one of the Spurs' own picks down the line would be a better deal. If the Suns said no, we want the unprotected Atlanta in whatever that 27, that's where you kind of pause. But maybe it's worth it. Yeah, that's a good question, Nick. There is a line at some point where it's too much.
Everything's
I'm not sure what that line is.
Analysis, right? I mean, that's why we weren't on board with Giannis, because it was just too much cost,
right,
for the future,
right,
and too many contracts in the future. Whereas Durant isn't that problem. So what is
Jeff
the benefit analysis for this? What's your max?
Yes, and that's like, I don't have the answer to that. I think it's somewhere in that area of the Atlanta pick.
It's like pornography, you know it when you see it.
Yep. back to Jeff's question about the Harrison Barnes thing. The easiest way to make the trade machine work, the salary cap numbers work, is Devin Vassell and Harrison Barnes. Now, you could do Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson, which I don't think anybody necessarily wants to do. You could do Devin Vassell and a whole bunch of smaller contracts. A whole bunch meaning like Jeremy Sohan, Malachi Branham,
Blake
Wesley. And here's where I ask you,
and those would just be the Suns don't really want those players as players. The Wesley and Branham, those would just be contract fillers to make the deal work, and then those guys are off the Suns' books.
Correct, but here's where I ask you about Jeremy Sohan and his positioning in the future of this franchise. Are you over that? Do you think he's no longer foundational, integral? Or where do you see him? Like, is that somebody that you just throw into a deal if the Suns ask for him? Or are you of the mindset that, no, we still don't want to give up on what he might be yet, and we would rather give up a guy like Harrison Barnes, good locker room guy, but not part of the future?
The Sohan thing might be, I mean, that's a very key question the Spurs front office has to answer as they go into any trades this summer. I think I think you hit on the one where how they evaluate Sohan and his fit to the future drives a lot of this. If you're asking me personally, I don't think he's a guy that's a deal breaker. You know, if a team would rather have Sohan than somebody else, and I don't for Kevin Durant, I don't know that he's a deal breaker for that, but he's at the same time, he's not a guy that I've given up on. I still think he has a place on the Spurs roster going forward. I think we've learned it's coming off the bench and being that kind of energy guy, maybe a guy that fits into certain defensive lineups really well. So I don't, it's not a guy you're just rushing to get rid of, but I don't think he should be a guy that holds up a deal you really want to do.
He's an interesting piece. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, if the deal is for giving up Sohan or the future Atlanta pick, which one would you rather give up? Because those are probably the most two likely deals. Is either 14.
Man, that is a good question.
Or the or Sohan.
It might be Sohan.
Maybe, but then
if I could see
on the one hand, a lot of
that might be what they ask for.
And this is nothing against Sohan. It's more of like a timeline question, right? Like, because Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but Jeremy is extension eligible this summer already.
That's correct.
Like, it's probably not going to happen, but and then next year he'll be restricted.
After his fourth year, if he has not signed an extension, he will be a restricted free agent. Correct.
And this is about to be his fourth year.
He is heading into his fourth year. Yes.
Yep. So you're already at a point where you're going to have to make a decision on him that might involve paying him. So if he hasn't already wowed you yet, I think it's beneficial from the Spurs perspective to kind of push it down the road a little bit and take that shot with the Atlanta pick. If Phoenix says, we want Devin Vassell and the number 14 pick and either Jeremy Sohan or the Atlanta pick, I think the Spurs have to say, take Jeremy Sohan. The Atlanta pick works so much more on the Spurs timeline.
The thing about those all these future picks is they almost are never as good as and wind up being as good as you think. Like the Atlanta pick,
it's an asset.
Everyone loved. It's 14th. Yeah. The thing is, though, like one of them might work out. That's why you have a bunch of them, so that they do have some value in that. Yep. Like it only takes one of them to get you a number one pick when you're already you're already a playoff team. Or a top 5 pick when you're already in the conference finals. It only takes one of those to come in. So that's why they have value, even though like the Atlanta pick might end up being late lottery again, or maybe not lottery at all. Who knows? So
it makes for great podcasting. Like we've gone 45 minutes this week and about a deal that probably is not going to happen, but it's fun. It's fun to talk about.
And we also got a Justice Potter Stewart reference from Jeff. That was pretty cool.
That's right. True. That's. I hope people caught that. By the way, I wasn't talking about my own.
That's kind of why I brought it up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Looking out.
Go Google Justice Potter Stewart and pornography, or maybe don't. Maybe don't.
Don't do that.
Just stick to Justice Potter Stewart.
Yes.
Yeah. You know when you see it. Back when the Supreme Court was something else.
It's something else now too.
It's something else.
Something else.
Something else entirely.
Spurs were out there. I mentioned in passing Julian Champagny. Want to thank the young man for joining us, and want to thank Nick Talbot, sports editor, for running another excellent Alamo City High School Sports Awards, well attended by all the youngsters, the stars of tomorrow throughout San Antonio. It was a great event. Nick did a great job organizing it. David Hinojosa, Christina Wang, great job covering the high schools. And Julian Champagny came out to hand out the trophies and to talk to the idiot columnist for a little bit on stage. Very nice of him to join us. That was great, following the footsteps of who Nick Trade Jones did it last year. Keldon Johnson's done it.
Yes.
Always appreciate the Spurs help on that. Got to see Julian out there with Blake Wesley and Riley Minix and Stefan Castle playing some wheelchair basketball against some wounded warriors. That was a lot of fun. That was a fun column last week. You can look up. It's been an eventful summer for the Spurs. Jeff and Victor Wembanyama now sharing a haircut. That's been fun. Tom, anything you want to add before we sign off?
In Spurs Project Marvel news, we got a new mayor, Gina Ortiz-Jones, and that's notable, I guess, because she's not inclined to rubber stamp it, as her opponent might have been. So we'll see.
For the listeners that might not be familiar with Project Marvel, that is the downtown project that includes a new Spurs arena at the site of the Institute of Texas Cultures across from the Alamo Dome. So that mayoral election could have an impact on that, you think, Tom?
It will. We'll see. I'm just saying that she's not as inclined. She's on the record as, saying she's not as inclined to rubber stamp things as her opponent was. So we'll see.
But the way you understand it, Tom, it's likely to be a question on a November ballot for the people of San Antonio to weigh in on this, you think?
Correct.
Yeah.
And Molly Smith from the Express News is covering the heck out of it with guidance of Nisler. Yes.
So all kinds of things you can find on the expressnews.com. If you want to, you should have a couple of free clicks, but if you'd like to subscribe, we'd appreciate it. You get all kinds of news on the Spurs, Project Marvel, on down the line. That'd be great. We appreciate you listening. And I mentioned it earlier, programming note. We will not talk to you before the draft on the 25th, but we will have a morning after podcast where we will discuss what the Spurs did with their 2 draft picks, maybe some trades, maybe some other stuff. It should hit your digital players by the end of that week, maybe by the afternoon of June 26th. Look forward to talking to you then. Until then, take care of each other and keep it real.